My name
I
is
like that.
Venkatesh. I'm a physician. And my idea, basically, I'll just give a little bit of background. Obviously, healthcare is a big nightmare. And financially, quality-wise, there's a huge disconnect between physicians like myself or other providers like nurses and the ramifications of the service that we provide. And my idea kind of lies in the transparency sort of interface between the provider and our so-called nemesis, the administration. So the idea being that physicians have to write notes every day. So they imagine that your loved one or whoever is in the ICU where I work in the intensive care unit, and I'm the physician showing up. I have to actually examine the patient, interview the patient, write a note that says, this is what I see, these are the vital signs, this is the examination, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do today. At that point, I will write a bunch of orders, and it goes into this huge black box where, I hope that these orders will be done. I don't know when they'll be done. I don't know, I will be billing for my services that I think are correct, but I don't really know exactly what I'm going to get the money back from, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, I don't even know how well I'm achieving certain quality targets that now the government is saying that I need to achieve. So if I've prevented a certain complication, if I have not prevented a certain complication that will affect me financially because it affects the hospital, I am completely opaque to those ideas. So my idea is to create a software tool using ultimately a handheld device like a smartphone that basically has a number of screens, and on one screen will be a note writing tool. So I will say it'll be voice to text, and one question is, I don't know if that kind of technology exists, where I know there's a lot of noise interference in the ICU and other care settings. But voice to text will enter the data into my notes. From that, it will be the data will be basically analyzed, and it will give me prompts to say, hey, look, have you thought about giving aspirin for this patient with heart disease, or have you thought about giving a certain medication, et cetera, et cetera. I will compose the note. It'll actually analyze and tell me this is the level of the visit that you just provided. So it will go to another element that says, okay, we have just coded your visit. This is the level. You are going to submit this bill, and it's going to actually be linked to a different screen that will actually make your bill for you, so you don't actually have to go through what happens now, which is a paper transmission to someone else who creates that. It'll electronically send that bill, and on that screen, on your little handheld, you'll see what's been transmitted, what actually has been received, what your accounts receivable is, what your revenue is, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a note writing tool, note writing screen, you have a coding billing screen, and then another screen for quality. So there are, I don't know, 10 or 12 different things that the list is growing of what Medicare will provide, will say that you need to abide by, and how well I'm doing. And 70% of the time, it'll say you're achieving prevention for blood clots in the leg. For infection control, this is how much you're going to be washing your hands, et cetera, et cetera. That'll be a different screen. So you'll have basically a smartphone that has different screens that you can actually sift through, and by doing so, you have complete transparency as a provider. You know exactly how you're doing. You have everything that you need to do, everything that you need in order to create a note, and it's a real-time data acquisition for the provider, whereas now it's all done retrospectively. I don't know if I've done something to harm the patient that I will find out 3 or 4 weeks from now. If I submit a bill, I don't even see the return on that for 2 or 3 months. So what I'm trying to do is consolidate all these different elements, get the buy-in for the provider, because I have to write a note, and from that basically get all this other information, and ultimately break down this barrier between administration and physician. And by physician, I'm going to include nurses and other providers like physical therapists, et cetera, and ultimately, I know this is getting long, but the next iteration would be to have actually some sort of messaging in between these different providers. So if I write an order, boom, that's going to go to your nurse to say, look, the head of bed, it isn't 30 degrees, it's 25 degrees, can we change that? She'll, you know, ping me back with a message and says, hey, look, I made it 30 degrees. So my question is, is this even possible? I think obviously it's a big idea, but I'm grappling with this every day. It drives me nuts. So, and it seems something that seems so obvious to me, but I don't even know the components of how I approach just thinking about this in chunks or not, because I feel like it's such a big idea that has to live. The other thing I should say is that most hospitals spend a lot of money and effort on electronic health record or electronic medical record, which is this all-encompassing behemoth of effort and money that is spent to cover everything. This idea will live outside that, because most hospitals will say, you're coming close to my EMR, don't even get close to that. But it should have the capability at some later point to potentially, you know, plug into that. So anyway, that's the idea. That's basically the nutshell of the idea. I know it's really works.
So I actually really like it because I'm pretty passionate about everything going on in the health world, or more accurately said, the things that are going on that are sort of disrupting it. So a couple things to take a look at if you haven't already seen. There's a guy in New York, actually in Brooklyn more accurately, named Jay Parkinson, who's like big into everything health and stuff. He actually started a consulting company that does nothing but looks at new ideas related to health. It's called The Future Well. You can just Google it. He's been on the company cover like Fast Company magazine. Started his first practice like pretty much right out of med school, and just like, you know, opened up shop. He was like, I want to use the same tool as you use. He had a website that he built, which not too many doctors know how to build a website, but he did. And like you could like schedule it yourself on his Google Calendar, and the appointment, like you get a little notice on his iPhone, and he made house calls. So it was kind of cool thing. It was like totally different than what you know a doctor to be. But their entire consulting practice deals with things just like what you're talking about, and kind of how to take them from where they are now, which is conceptual, and actually turn them into reality. I would definitely take a look at that.
Okay, thanks.
I was going to say, I mean, as you were describing this, I was like, iPad would be the ultimate tool, or I know that you guys typically have great technology in the hospital. Some hospitals do. And so you could technically use one of those rolling computers, and it could just be an app. And I mean, it could just tie to a database on the back end that sends, pulls and sends all the information. But yeah,
So, can I ask you a question about that? So, I have been thinking about that. I want to get away from the rolling thing because it's too cumbersome. I think iPad versus smartphone. I mean, I have this Droid, if you can believe it, I just got this thing like a month ago, but this thing actually provided a template for me. The question is, do I need an iPad with, well, part of it is data. So how much data can I actually store on this? This is not going to be part of the EMR. So it's not going to be this endless archive. It's going to live for when I'm going to start in the ICU, so it's going to be short stays of a couple days, up to a week. And then potentially that's where that will hook into the EMR. At some point you can download it. But do I need an iPad, or can I get away with a Droid, or something like that? Does that exist now?
I think the iPad is probably the best for movement. I mean, like in the screen size, or another tablet. There's 10 other tablets coming out that are going to compete with the iPad the next 6 months.
It kind of depends on your your experience as a doctor in the ICU in terms of, is it going to work for you to carry around a big pad? Like, what I hear from you is that you don't want to carry around a big pad. You really want something really small. And most of the functionality you described, like, it'd probably be easier to do on a bigger screen like an iPad, but I think if that was just a non-starter, you get away with a small screen smartphone.
So what about the actual input system though on that small screen?
He wants to do it voice to text, which like Dragon, the Dragon Dictate people, I believe they have a medical product that will actually recognize all the jargon.
Well, the only problem with that though is that you think about like, it has to be so good. It's like if you make one mistake and you're like, oh yeah, like a mistake in the medical world is a fairly important thing. Where it's like, if it's
like I said, it's an existing
grammatical
product,
problem, it's one thing, but in the medical world, there's real implication to that.
Has a specific taxonomy in natural language voice recognition for the medical field. They also have an app in the App Store, and that's just general voice recognition. But you would probably need to look at, there's like Vox and Nuance and different voice recognition providers as your OEM to plug into this. And I think you're right on target that Nuance has something specific for medicine.
Nuance, and what was the other one you said?
Right.
Dragon
Is by Nuance, and I think it's Vox. I'll have to look.
Dragon is free.
But the medical one.
Right.
It's not good.
Yeah, the reason the voice to text was because I wanted to stay away from text. You know, that obviously you need an iPad for that.
That is actually time, unfortunately, but it sounds like we got some good comments we'd like to make here. If you guys want to follow up, what you can do is actually, we're going to post these videos. Feel free to opine right there on our YouTube channel.